This is lesson 4.3, factoring and solving quadratics. For the last several lessons we have graphed quadratic equations. Now we're going to factor them and solve them. And if you did not like graphing, then you will like this much better. Before we start factoring, let's recall some things that will help us in the process of factoring. The first thing we're going to do is multiply two binomial equations, or two binomial expressions. And that process is called FOIL. And FOIL stands for first times first, outside times outside, inside times inside, and last times last. FOIL is just a fancy way to distribute. So if you've learned it as distribution, it's just the same thing. So if I go through my process where I have first times first, so x times x gives me x squared. Outside times outside would be x times negative 2, that's negative 2x. Inside times inside would be negative 5 times x, which would be negative 5x. And last times last would be negative 5 times negative 2, which is positive 10. If I combine my like terms right here, I have x squared minus 7x plus 10. And this is a quadratic expression. It started out as two binomial terms, and after we FOILed it, we have a quadratic expression. So let's look at another one. If I do first times first, that's x squared. If I do outside times outside, that is plus 2x. If I do inside times inside, I have minus 6x. And if I do last times last, I have minus 12. Combine these two like terms here, and I have x squared minus 4x minus 12 for my quadratic expression. Now the reason we're looking at this is because today's lesson is on factoring, and factoring is actually the process of starting with this and going backwards to where we started. So we're trying to find the factors. The two binomial terms are our factors. So if we have a quadratic and we want to go backwards and figure out what are the factors, here's what our process is going to be. The first thing you're going to do is look at this last term. This is c. If you remember, this is a x squared plus bx plus c. Your c term is going to tell us what we need to multiply. So I'm going to look at what multiplies to give me 28, and there's not very much. I could do 4 times 7, or I could do 2 times 14, and those are the only two options I have to give me 28. So now with these combinations, I want to see which of the combinations that I have could add up to negative 11. So could 4 and 7 add up to 11? Yes. Could 2 and 14 add up to 11? No, that's not possible. So the question would be, how do I make 4 and 7 become 11 but also be negative? That would have to be negative 4 and negative 7. So if I just double check this, negative 4 times negative 7 is 28. Negative 4 plus negative 7 is negative 11. So my factors are going to be x minus 4 and x minus 7. So it was negative 4 and negative 7, so it becomes minus 4 and minus 7. That's the factor. That's all you have to do. Let's look at another one. If I'm trying to factor this, I'm going to look at 65. So I have to start off and figure out what multiplies to give me 65 that could add up to give me 8. So what multiplies to give me 65? Well, I know 65 is divisible by 5, so 5 times what would give me 65? That's going to be 13. And that seems to be the only numbers that I've got. So how could I take 5 and 13 and make it become 8? Well, that would work if I had negative 5 and positive 13. Negative 5 plus 13 equals 8. And negative 5 times 13 equals negative 65, which I should have paid attention to begin with. So m minus 5 and m plus 13 are my factors. That's all I got to do. Okay, so we're trying to factor and solve these quadratic equations. So I'm going to factor this one and then go through the process to show you how we use that to solve. So again, I'm going to start with my 12, and I'm looking for things that multiply to give me 12. So 2 and 6. How about 3 and 4? Those things multiply to give me 12. Now I need to see if I can make one of these combinations add up to negative 8. So could 3 plus 4 be negative 8? No. Could 2 plus 6 be negative 8? Well, possibly, as long as the 2 was negative and the 6 was negative. Negative 2 plus negative 6 would add up to be negative 8. So x minus 2 and x minus 6 are my factors. Now the difference here in this problem is that it's equal to 0. That's how we know we have to solve, is because it has the equal sign. So since it's equal to 0, I've got two factors. So I take each factor and I set each of them equal to 0. X minus 2 could be 0, x minus 6 could be 0. So if I add 2 to both sides, x equals 2 is one of my solutions. And if I add 6 on the other equation, x equals 6 is my other solution. So the two solutions for this problem are x equals 2 and x equals 6. Okay, so let's look at another problem similar to this. It's n squared minus 6n equals 0. And the difference in this problem is that there is no c. So that might be really confusing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write n squared minus 6n plus 0. So basically what I've done is I put 0 in the position where c should be. So now think about this. I'm trying to think of something that multiplies to give me 0. Well, 0 times anything gives you 0. So if I'm trying to add up to negative 6, what could I multiply by 0 to get 0 that could also add up to give me negative 6? So what if I did 0 times negative 6? Well, that multiplies to give me 0 still, and when I add them together, 0 plus negative 6 adds up to give me negative 6. So my two factors are n minus 6 and n plus 0. You could also have done this as minus 0, either way. Now, my two factors, when I set them equal to 0, n minus 6 equals 0. When you add 6 to both sides, you get one solution as n equals 6. When I do n plus 0 equals 0, well, all I have to do is drop the 0 off, because n plus 0 is still just n. So one of my solutions is 0. Anytime you're missing the c, one of your solutions should be 0. You're just picking 0 and you're picking this number right here so that they add up to be negative 6. Okay, and I have one more example for you. What if my equation's not equal to 0? So I have r squared plus 2r equals 80, but it's not equal to 0, so how do I solve this? Well, my first step is going to be to subtract the 80, so that my equation is r squared plus 2r minus 80 equals 0. It absolutely has to be equal to 0 before I can factor it. If it's not equal to 0 before I factor it, then what happens when I factor it is it will be wrong. So you have to make sure it's equal to 0 before you factor. So now my equation is r squared plus 2r minus 80 equals 0. So I'm going to take this c, this negative 80, and I'm going to list out some things that multiply to give me 80. So it could be 2 and 40. It could be 4 and 20. It could be 8 and 10. It could be 5 and 16. I forgot that one. Okay, so keep in mind as you're listing your factors, we're trying to add this up to 2. 2 and 40 will never add up to 2. 4 and 20 will never add up to 2. 8 and 10, that's possible. How about 5 and 16? Could that ever add up to 2? No. So how do I make 8 and 10 become positive 2? Well, it would have to be a negative 8 and a positive 10. Our negative 8 times, is negative 8 times positive 10 going to give me negative 80? Yes. So I have r minus 8, and I have r plus 10. These are my two factors. So if I say r minus 8 equals 0, and r plus 10 equals 0, then I'm going to get a solution of r equals 8 and r equals negative 10. Sorry to be off the page there. Okay, so the process is pretty simple when you want to factor. What multiplies to give me the last number and adds to give me the middle number? And then I factor it and I can solve it. So here's a problem for you to do on your own. This should be in your notes for me to check, and then we can do some practice problems.